Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is an extremely terrifying forest encounter, and I think you guys are going to really enjoy this one. Huge thank you, huge shout to Jesse Clark, the author of this story, for letting me have permission to narrate this on the show. I really enjoyed reading through this, Jesse, so thank you ever so much for letting me do this. Without further ado, guys, let's get into tonight's story, entitled A Long Night in the Witch's Wood. Let's get straight into that. The following excerpt has been updated from an old 18th century English storybook that I found, titled The Life and Times of Isaiah Ferrin. The woods in this region carry on and on for miles. They are deep and rich, and thick and unyielding, and are bored up at their easternmost border only by rivers and riverlands, and at their westernmost by the foothills of mountains, and to the north and south by more of the same. At one point the forest parts around the hilltop clearing that bears a merchant's town called Moon River at its crest. But that place was still a good ways east of us, when Francis Papin leaned out from the warmth of his carriage and said to me on my horse, "It's well past dusk now, Ferrin. What say we stop for the night?" "Tired after a day of sitting, are you?" I said back, without so much as looking at the man. "Wouldn't you want your precious furs to spoil before we got to town?" "Furs won't spoil. Not like it's any of your business, mercenary. Your business is doing what I say, and I say we find a cabin and wait it out through the night." "My business is escorting you to town in one piece, is it not?" Now, I did look at him, and he said nothing, so I continued. "So as far as I'm concerned, I am the one in charge until we get there." "Is that a damn fact? Maybe I'll decide not to pay you a thing, mercenary." "There isn't a man in Moon River who wouldn't believe that you and your gang of highwaymen tried to rob blind a humble merchant in the woods." "Well, you do know what they say about these woods." He blinked. "I hired you for a reason. What of it?" "Well, say I slit your throat right here on this spot and have your Hollis over there do the same to your driver. You think those men in Moon River wouldn't believe that something other than myself was responsible for the crime?" He said not a word more, so again I continued. "And perhaps after we're done with you, we'll just sell all your furs for ourselves when we reach town. I think we'd fetch a mighty profit. What say you, Hollis?" Hollis rode his horse around the front of the carriage and eyed the driver with a nasty stare, before circling around to my side. "I'd say we'd make more in that endeavour than this one." "You hear that, Papin?" I said. "We'd make more in that endeavour than this one." The merchant said only, "Bastards, the pair of you," and slammed shut the carriage window. Then Hollis leaned in. "Fat merchant's a right prick, isn't he? Has been since we took this damn job." We rode in silence for a moment, but then Hollis leaned in again and said, quieter this time, "He's right though, you know." "About what?" "We shouldn't be out here at night, especially not on these roads. Things are already eyeing us from the thicket." "I know, that's why I don't want to stop. Moon River can't be more than 2 or 3 hours off." "Well, give it another half hour on the mark and the sun will be down. Then it won't matter how fast we're moving. Those things will be faster." Again, there was a briefness without talking. But I knew he was right, and soon enough we saw an appropriate place to stay. A small cabin in a clearing not much bigger than itself, and I pointed out to Papin's driver. It took the merchant himself not more than a minute to fill the turn. "Ah, I see you two have had some sense in things," he said through the open window. Watch it, Lord. We're not making any stop on your account. He ignored the comment and leaned far enough out to see the cabin itself. Wait! That there is where we'll stay for the night? That cabin? It is. It's a damn shanty! What the hell do you take me for? Some rat-eating peasant? No. I take you for a man who will either sleep in a perfectly well-built house for a night, or out in the grass. I rode to the front of the company before he had a chance to respond, and while Hollis guarded the carriage, I rode a quick lap around the place and found it quite suitable. Then I dismounted and tied my horse to the sill post, and brought up a pistol and approached the door, and knocked once, twice, 3 times. Anyone inside? I said. We're tired travellers. We seek only a place to sleep for the night. There was no answer, so I pushed open the door and let the moonlight hit the place from the opening. There was a scarcity of it, but I could see well enough to determine the cabin's emptiness, and once I did, I waved in Hollis, who in turn waved in the carriage, which approached slowly. It came to a full rest when a few feet in front of the door, and when it did, the driver dismounted and opened the door for Pappen. Hollis brought in the muskets, and the driver brought in the merchant's storage, and the merchant himself brought only wine. Once he made it inside, he took a seat on the only chair in the room. I struck a match for a light. So, what'll you fix me for supper, mercenary? I wasn't aware I was being paid to cook. I leaned my musket up against the door. Well, surely you can't expect me to just starve. Not our fault you brought nothing but your wine, said Hollis. He bit into a serving a salted meat as if to taunt the man. And it's not my fault I wasn't informed of a meal wouldn't be provided on the journey. You men can hunt, can you not? We can, but in these woods after sundown it'll be us that's hunted, not the other way round. Pappen was unimpressed. Oh, come on. Trained killers such as yourselves. Step softly, make not a lot of noise, and whatever foul things there are out there, if any, surely won't take notice of you. And don't you think a musket shot would alert whatever foul things there are out there to our presence? Hollis chewed as he spoke. Well, then use the Sam Dame musket to shoot the damn thing. Hollis and I traded glances, and then we looked back to Pappen. Do you not know what lies out here, merchant? I said. Highwaymen and brigands, what of it? I can't imagine you'd have stopped here for the night if you expected an ambush. Highwaymen and brigands, said Hollis. Is that all you've heard of? Let me tell you something, Lord. Lord Pappen. They don't call this place the Bandit's Grove or the Highwayman Forest. Do you know what they call it? Pappen shook his head. They call it the Witch's Wood. And do you know why it bears such a name? Another head shake. No. Because not far off from this very spot, Hollis continued, backing Pappen up against the wall, you'll find forest clearings lined with dead things in the trees. Raccoons, foxes, squirrels, all tied up with twine to the trunks and rotting to the bone. But not just them. You'll see horses too, taken from the carriage of stupid, fat fucking merchants who travel alone in the woods to save a penny on the ferry. And what of them? What of the merchants themselves? Any tales on what happens to them? Oh, yes, I joined in now. Yes, see, my lord, you can't satiate the devil's bloodlust with the beast, now can you? He shook his head. I suppose not. That's right, I continued. You'll need a man for that. But sadly, there isn't one alive today who knows just what it is the wood witches and their man-wolves do to their captives here. And why is that, Hollis? Because those captains never make it home to tell the tale, Ferrin. We all know is that deep out in the thicket there are heads on spikes and hanging corpses, a warning, as it were, to trespassers. and two haughty fools. Pappen did his unworthy best to look unfaded. And them folks up the Moon River, I continued. They say that every night under a full moon you'll see flickers of firelight in the trees, and along with it you'll hear a strange chanting coming out from the depths of the wood. Chanting? Oh yes, Hollis said. Wood women dancing wickedly around a fire under the full moon, dressed in rags and tatters and fur, setting ancient words to ancient tunes that summon up old devils. So says the folks in Moon River, anyway. Pappen wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead and planted his back to the southern wall. And what's got to do with you? You know, with captured travellers? Well, again, I said, we don't know. Nobody's ever seen the Coven's supper up close and made it back to speak of it. But those same folk in Moon River, they say that on a full moon's eve, 3 hours past midnight, when the chanting and the roar of the flame hit their peak, and all the evil of the wood is whipped up into an unholy fury, you can hear something else in the midst of it. Pappen gulped. Something else? And what would that be? Screaming. Hollis lunged forward, and when he did, Pappen shrieked and backed into the chair over it, and fell to his ass. Hollis and I shared a laugh, and even the driver, after he recovered from his shock, tried to hide a smile before going back to task of organising the luggage. That wasn't funny, Pappen said. He rose again with an effort and dusted off his waistcoat. That wasn't funny at all. Now I demand to know what's to be done about my supper. Learn to have a laugh at your own expense, Lord, I said. There's a deer out there at the far edge of the clearing. Hollis, you mind staying here while I kill the thing? Just be quick about it. I grabbed my knife and my musket for good measure, and turned back once I reached the door. Driver, I said. The boy, about 18, if I had to guess, looked up from his task. Sir? What's your name, lad? Moses, sir. Jed Moses. That's a shit name, son. You should be ashamed. Anyway, come along with me. I need your help carrying back the deer. The boy looked excitedly at Pappen, who rolled his eyes in a yes, and then he bounded on after me, and together we stepped out into the cold and the dark of the night in Witch's Wood. The deer grazed lazily on the other side of the road, not yet having seen us. Are you going to shoot it, Sir Ferrin? Whispered Moses. First of all, boy, I'm not a knight, so drop the sir. Second of all, no. I want to make this as little noise as possible, so if we're lucky, we can sneak around the damn thing and take the bitch from the rear. I only brought the gun in case of an emergency. I handed it to him, and he cradled it like a jewel, and then I unsheathed my hunting knife. Together, we moved to the tall grass in the left, where the deer couldn't see, and I rolled my foot around from heel to toe to muffle the sound of my booted footfalls in the grass and dirt. Come on then. Come on then. Easy does it. Easy does it. But without reason or warning, and not more than a second before I was about to lunge for the animal's throat, the deer finished its meal and bounded off down the hill into the thicket. Damn it! I peered after it. It wasn't sprinting, really just softly running, and not much faster than I could move. I said back to Moses, come on lad, let's get after that damn thing. So, in we went behind it, through the underbrush and shrubbery, and under branches and over logs and rocks and stone. The deer, somehow having not yet seen the pair of us, plodded lazily along the sacrificed its lead by doing so. 40 feet, 30, 25. I could nearly taste the venison. And when we weren't more than a leap away, I drew my knife and made ready for a killing lunge. But then The deer took up a pivot on its front and vanished behind a wall of trees. "Faster, boy, with me!" Moses and I followed it, but then we stopped. Moses whispered, "Where did it go? Where did it go?" "I don't know, kid," I said back. "Damn thing was right here. Couldn't have gotten far. Keep your eyes sharp." I kept moving, rolling my step, peering into the underbrush for signs of movement or for hoof prints or the smell of fur. But Moses hadn't yet begun to follow. "What's wrong, lad? You coming?" But he said nothing in response. Instead, he stood tall and straight, and he trembled, and he sweat, and he quivered his lip. And then he stretched out his arm and pointed at something behind me. I turned to look. "What is it? What?" And then I stopped too. The deer was standing there, staring out at the pair of us from a ways out in the thicket and showing no signs of worry. But no longer was it this beautiful buck we'd chased. No, instead, it was diseased and rotting alive, a sickly, thin, quite a hideous sight to behold indeed. But it was more what stood next to the thing that frightened us most. It was a woman. I saw, once she stepped into the moonbeam, she was old and thin, and her hair was grey and matted, and it fell in clumps to her shoulders and stood out from her head. She smiled a toothless grin, and then cackled demonically. "Moses," I said, without looking away from the witch, "hand me the musket, lad. Do it now." He did, and I shouldered the thing, although neither the witch nor the deer seemed to mind the gesture. She only grinned. So I breathed deep and moved my finger over to the trigger of the gun. And crack! We whirled around. "What was that?" "Another musket shot," I said. "From the cabin." We traded only the briefest of glances, and then we turned to look at the witch. I felt an unwelcome chill. Where did she go?" Moses said. "I don't know, lad, but I ain't going to go searching for the bitch. Come on, come with me." And with him at my heels, we tore back up the way we came, over the rock and stone, under branches that whipped, and through creeks that soaked through the leather of our boots. We climbed and set our boots to the mud, and soon we stumbled back onto the old, beaten road that split the field. "Oh, God, no!" I slapped my hand over Moses' mouth and wrestled the boy to the ground before he broke off in a sprint towards the wreckage ahead. "Keep silent, lad! We must not be alone in this place." Only slowly did I let him back to his feet, and I readied up my musket. We moved through the grass and the way we'd come, to our right now, past the sacked carriage on its old splintered wheels and the dead horse attached to it. The poor beast's harness had been split by a laceration that gutted its midsection and spilled its guts to the mud. Already it stunk of rot, and similar fates had befallen the two other horses near the door. I stepped over them carefully. "Hollis! Hollis!" I said once I stepped into the past of the threshold. "Hollis, you in here?" I smelled gun smoke in the cabin, and I smelled something worse, like wet dog. But I saw and heard not a thing, and I didn't dare light another match. "Hollis! Hollis!" I whispered. And then we heard a rustling in the corner. I shouldered up my musket and whispered, "Declare yourself." With my head, I signalled for Moses to flank, and he scuffled his way to the opposite corner and sat down in the shadows. Then we saw movement from the offending corner, and the throwing loose of a quilt. It's me," Pappen said. "Don't shoot. Please, God, don't shoot." We're not going to shoot you, Pappen. Just tell us what happened. Where's Hollis?" The merchant gradually, and with his hand still raised high, revealed himself and sat up. "Those things took him," he said. "They stormed right in and..." Wait! What things?" The wood witches! Those wood witches! And he trowed off. And what? Towering things! Black things! Wolf beasts! And they were snarling! Wild dogmen at witches! Wild dogmen at the witches! Command! They had the wild devil in them, Ferrin. I swear they did. Hollis shot his musket at one, and didn't so much as scratch his fur. And where were you in all of this? He didn't answer. By the moonlight, Moses and I caught each other's glare, and then I turned back to Pappen. I asked you a question, merchant. I held my musket at the hip. He stammered only, I'm sorry, I truly am. What? Sorry for what? They said they'd spare me if I led you here. And all at once, I heard the damn witch's cackle from behind, and it was followed by footsteps and breathing, heavy, laboured breathing, and that smell of wet dog, as pungent as ever. Moses fell to his arse and scampered to the far wall, unable to scream, and Pappen merely repeated, I'm sorry, over and over again. They said they'd let me go, let me live, I'm sorry. Miserable fucking coward, I mumbled, and then I whirled around with the musket and fired. I am walking in the woods, not gracefully, but in dull, pounding, uneven footsteps, as if I suffer a limped gait. My head hurts, my sides hurt, breathing itself hurts too. I swallow in the air in heaving but shallow breaths, and it is not enough. I smell terrible things, a rotting, wet dog and blood, and I see terrible things. The trees here are filled with mutilated creatures, and I hear terrible things too. There is a cackling, wicked laugh. I turn to look, and I see a hideous, old, frail beast of a woman there. Her hair is grey and unkempt, and her face is filled with age, and her mouth is toothless and cracked and rotten. The witches laugh again, and says something in a language that I can neither understand nor identify, but those words are coarse and rough and mocking, and when I hear them, my vision swims, and it tunnels, and it darkens, and then I am seated at a table. It is made of deep wood, and has no food or wine on its surface, but only a candle, which provides just enough light to throw back the infinite darkness that surrounds it. There are others here too, and they, like me, are seated around this table, unmoving, and with their hands turned palm up and placed on the wood in front of them. And at the far end of the table is a standing figure, a man in a black cloak, wearing as if a mask of the severed head of a ram. He carries a black book in his hands, and as he reads its contents, I can hear a chorus coming up from the nothingness. It is all at once slow and faint and beautiful, and dark and wicked, and ancient and ethereal in nature. I can make out the words Astrum Virnos, Astrum Meus, Astrum Mortem, Astrum Northus, sung in endless repetition, and although I know not their meaning, it does not matter. The words course through me and take me, and as I listen, all my fears and all my pleasures and all my thoughts melt away. I feel not a thing, no joy and no peace, no fear and no anguish, no sadness and no sorrow. I simply am. The goatman stares at me. Somehow I know this through his mask, and then there is a rumbling like thunder, and then I am no longer in that room at the table. I am somewhere else now, the great hall of a mighty palace. It seems, no, as I look around it, and all the pillars and all of the jewels, I see it is not just a palace but a temple too, and I stand at the centre of it, and to my left and to my right are endless hosts of wicked things singing that chorus, Astrum Virnos, Astrum Meus, Astrum Mortem, Astrum Northus, over and over again. And in this place the song is louder and clearer and more beautiful than they were in the black room. And instead of a goat man, there is something else on the mighty seat ahead of and above me. It is snarling, mighty beast upon the throne. In its left hand it carries the black book, and in its right that is set up on its lap, it holds the world. I approach it in a passive awe, and when I stand at the foot of the stairs beneath the beast, it opens up its mouth, and then I am back in the woods. I feel as if I've been here forever now. I can remember nothing, but I care little, because I also feel nothing. No emotions, no pain, no memory. I simply move forward, ever forward, through the grass and the dirt, and the past towering wolf beasts and other old women, dancing and singing ancient chants. Above me the night sky is split and broken, and at its centre swells a vast red maelstrom of cloud, through which unholy hosts come to dine on what will be offered. And ahead of me, at the centre of these proceedings, there is a mighty pyre set to burn. The women take me and place me upon the stakes, next to 3 other men. One of them appeared in a similar state of bliss to myself, and another cries for mercy, for what reason I cannot fathom. And the other, a boy of 18, perhaps, has his eyes shut tight as he whispers, "Please God, please save us, please Jesus." Instantly I snapped free of the trance, and the witch approaching the pyre with a lit torch fell back and dropped the thing into the grass. What in the hell? I looked up. The sky bore no swelling vortex to Hades. I saw but stars instead, a glimmering multitude of them, and silver clouds hit back by moonlight. And then I looked out at the clearing. The coven of witches that had gathered, and all of their forces of wolf beasts, had ceased their demonic chants. Now they scowled at the lot of us with fury and venom and a host of menace, and they began to approach. "Hollis," I said to my friend, who stood on the pier beside me. He turned. "Hell, boy, what happened to you? Did these fuckers do that?" "Never mind the black eye. We need to move." We're tied?" "We're not. Those bitches ain't yet roped us to this wood." He looked down. He moved his hands, and he moved his feet. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. And we leapt down together from the stake. He kicked the fallen witch in the jaw, and grabbed the torch she lost. I myself ran around the pier and collected the other men in our company. "Let's go, old man." I grabbed Papin by the shoulder cloth of his coat. I can nearly see Moon River from here. He slid sloppily off the pier and tumbled to the grass, and I moved to Moses while he regained his footing. "Come on, boy," I said, "and don't stop your praying." He too leapt off the pier when he realised we were free, and then our company took off with a haste towards Moon River, with a wicked host at our back. "Move, lads, move with all you've got in you." We fled across the clearing, through the grass, with its blades to our hip. And then we tore into the forest, and half leapt, half ran down the sloping mud-soaked hill. Over logs we went, over rocks too, and stones, and we ducked under whipping branches and splashed through swamp water bogs. And behind us, never more than a good leap away, thundered a storm of our hunters. They screamed and shouted and howled and ran, often on all fours with demonic speed. And soon enough, they weren't only behind us, or close behind us. No. Soon, I saw things in the trees beside us, more woodfolk who joined the chase. There were wolfmen too, bounding in lockstep in the shadow of the deep, and the forest shuddered with their footfalls, and the devil's red of their eyes carried with it an unspeakable malice. "Don't stop now, don't slow your fight, don't slow." Snap! I turned to look just in time to see Francis Papin trip over his own twisted ankle and tumble hard over the offending branch. He hit the dirt with his face and had only just lifted his eyes back up off the trail when a werewolf fell onto his back, followed by another, and behind them a host of wood witches. His screams were shrill, but I turned the fear to force and pumped my legs next to Hollis and just behind Moses. On and on we ran. across another shallow clearing and a stone-dammed brook, and over an old fence that we mounted at its lowest reachable point. I turned to Hollis. He appeared sick and set to burst from the effort of flight, and I said, "We're near the town now, friend. Stay with me." And he nodded, but not said a word. Behind us, and gaining rapidly, we heard and felt the approach of monstrous wolf beasts. I doubled my efforts, and Moses his, and Hollis his, for what he could muster, and yet despite it all, I didn't think we were fast enough. "Please, Jesus," I heard Moses say under his breath, "send help." And then, just as we began to stumble from exhaustion, the trees began to thin and they began to shorten, and then they broke into their entirety, and we found ourselves trailing our hunters in an open field hit by the end of the moonbeam. The grass fell to the dirt, and the dirt swept into a road, and the road, after only the briefest passage, led us into the outskirts of the sprawling town of Moon River. The three of us waved our arms and screamed our warning to the townsfolk. "Help us!" Moses shouted. "Help us, please!" And all at once the window lanterns of the town turned on one after the other. The residents threw themselves out of them at the waist and raised up the alarm at our plight, which now was theirs. "The coven is upon us," we heard, "and the wolves on them with them." And then with the shouts came the crack of musketry from the windows facing west, and with that came in turn a howling shout from the coven. It now raced across the field, not in pursuit of us alone, but of the town they had now engaged in their fit of madness, and that now rose up to meet them with all of its bullets and all of its blades and all of its strength of heart. We broke into the town proper not a minute later, and we did so amongst in a fit of chaos that was making its way down to the streets to fight. I could hear shouted voices in the houses and shops lining the streets, and brandishing of leather and metal. There would be a fight tonight. But behind us I also heard the snarl of the damned wolf beast and its thunderous rolling gallop of gait, and then I felt its breath on my neck, and the foul stench of it filled my nostrils. "Please God," Moses said, having felt the same thing. "One more." And at that moment a man above shouted, "Here, man, take it!" and he threw down his woods axeman. From the window to the street it buried its blade in the dirt, and I grabbed the thing by the handle as I ran by it and turned my momentum into a twisting leap, and I brought it down on the wolf's head with all my strength. The wolf beast howled, and for the quickest, briefest moment I thought I'd dealt the thing at least a wounding blow. But I wasn't quite so lucky. In then it stood on its hind legs and bellowed out a roar, and then it swept me to the bricks with its paws. Instantly the wind was knocked out of my lungs, and I fell. "Ferrin!" Moses shouted from the much too far away. The wolf leapt up, and in that moment time itself seemed to slow, but it never made it to the ground. In a flash of metal and flesh, a horse hit the beast as it was in full gallop, and together they tumbled away from me, neighing and roaring, and with the horse's rider trying fruitlessly to unsheath his blade from the weight of the beast fell on top of him. But then came another horse, and another, and after a charge of 15 such riders, the damned wolf stayed dead. Those riders then broke out onto the field to engage the coven. "Ferrin!" Moses pulled me to my feet. "Are you hurt? Are you hurt, sir?" "I'm fine, but we can't stay here. Hollis, we've got to go." But I stopped when I saw my friend. He had laid himself out on the cobblestone, with his face to the air and his arms stretched out to his left and his right, and he struggled mightily to breathe. Moses fled to his side while I limped behind. "Hollis!" Moses said. Another pair of riders thundered past us and missed Hollis's boots by a half inch. Moses turned to me. "He's collapsed from exhaustion, sir. What do we do?" "That's no exhaustion, son. It's something worse." Hollis's skin, I'd noted, had turned a sickly colour. Coven bastards must have done something to him before we ran. Come with me. Let's get him help. Moses nodded, and together, as the cacophony of battle fell around us, we hoisted my friend up to his feet and carried him down the street. Men-at-arms and militia ran on past us in the other direction. Help us, Moses shouted. Where's the surgeon? But in a dim of chaos, not a man heard us, nor had the time to answer. There were shouted orders and horseshoe clops of stone, and the ceaseless rustle of blade and metal as Moon River did its darndest to muster up its defence. Come on, lad, I adjusted my grip. Come on, there's no help to be found here. And so we took him deeper and deeper yet into town, past homes and inns and shops and merchants, where Pappen would have sold his wares for a hefty price. But there were no doctors about, and Hollis, for his worth, now dragged his feet behind us and rolled his head with the stepping. We're losing him, sir. I know we're losing him, damn it. Don't you think I know that? And behind us, as always, we heard the snarl of wolves and the cackle of demonic witches as they bounded off walls and roofs and fell to the men below. Musket shots split the din in passing succession, but by their infrequency it was more apparent the men of Moon River were fighting a losing battle against a desperate, monstrous foe. We quickened up our pace. Moses managed to look over his shoulder and Hollis's shoulders. Why haven't they given up the chase? I don't know, kid. In there, come on. He turned to look in the direction I nodded my head in, a church with its priest at the stoop, blessings and regiments that flew on past to stop the horde. He said his prayers even as he was ignored, but he stopped when he saw us approach. Father, I said, laying Hollis on his back against the red brick of the church wall. Father, please help us, please. And the priest looked us over and then turned to Hollis. He drew his lips into a thin line. What's happened to him? We were about to be sacrificed in the woods, Moses said, but we escaped, and... You men escaped the Coven supper? Never mind that, man, I said. We ran from the beasts and they followed us, but something foul's taken my friend. I nodded at Hollis, who coughed up a blackened fluid. His hands had begun to shake and seize. The priest began to bless Hollis with incantation, and Moses joined in a short order. Please, Jesus, he said, please, God, help the man. Show me what to do. And at that moment, something fell from Hollis' satchel and tumbled down the steps of the church to the cobblestone below. A small host of hurried men nearly trampled it underfoot. What is that? It's the Black Book, I said. I saw it in my visions, some wicked tomb. It is, wielded by the Coven to throw their spirits into a trance. I descended the stairs and moved to grab the thing. No, the priest shouted, don't touch that evil thing. But it was too late. My fingertips brushed the binding of the book, and instantly I was thrown to the cobblestone, and my head pounded and my vision swam, and I could hear myself scream as terrible visions burrowed their way through my mind. I saw chanting, I saw dancing, I saw that black-red vortex above the sky, and the host of demons that flew on through it to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. Then I saw a man of staggering beauty, blonde and muscular, approach me with a stride and eyes and a smile that smacked of nauseating arrogance. He reached out his hand and... God help him, Moses! And the priest grabbed my shoulders and nearly threw me onto the steps of the church. The visions ended instantly. Hurts like hell, doesn't it? I turned around. Hollis popped himself up on his elbow. Got tired of being carried, I said to him. Glad to have you back. The priest, followed by Moses, brought the book up to us by folding it in his robes. He then dropped the thing on the flat step in front of the church door and said, This wicked, monstrous thing, how did you come by it? I took it before we ran, Hollis said. Thought it would piss the bastards off. Looks like I was right about that. He nodded towards the far end of the market square, where we saw men running back the way they'd come towards us, and without their muskets or blades, the line had broken at last, and now a monstrous host followed them close behind. We must act quickly, said the priest. They come from the book. They come for the book. Make no mistake about that. So what do you suggest? I said. We burn it. The square descended into madness. The wolf beasts tore the flesh off the men as they fled, and devoured them whole, and witches, filled up to the bursting with satanic strength, leapt down from the walls they'd climbed upon, and tore the poor men down. The priest, for his credit, sent Moses into the sanctuary to fetch oil. I lit up a match upon his return, and we doused the black book and set it to flame. Come on, you bastard, burn, burn, I said. The book at first smoked, and then it caught a slight spark in the midst of its canvas, and then it burst into a blue flame. Its edges began to roast, and at the sight of it the witch nearest the scene shrieked in panic and leapt up the stairs on all fours. Hollis knocked her back with a stone throw. But then another witch came, and another, and behind them a wolf beast with ropes of spit at its snout. I began to retreat up the stairs along with the priest, and Hollis prepared to move into the church. Moses, already with his back to the wall of the structure, prayed another prayer. Jesus, he said, one last time, help us. And at that moment the first of the morning sunbeams peeked over the rooftops behind us and poured out into the square. The stones flushed with red, and then orange, and then bright yellow, and in the light there was a roaring of agony from the coven. Their advance stopped like stone, and the witches fled without their power, and the wolf beasts shrank back into men and fell to the stones before scampering off towards the west. I looked at the source of the smoke. The black book was no more. For the next day, we helped the townsfolk clean up the mess of the slaughter. There were fewer men killed than we'd believed, which is fortunate enough, and far more of the wolfmen and the witches who, after having their devil's power bound, were hunted down and butchered in the streets and in the field and in the early depths of the wood. For some weeks hunting parties were gathering up and dispatched the clearings my company and I pointed out. The great prior was destroyed, and the dead things removed from the trees, and the heads on spikes lining those clearings were taken down and burned and buried with honours. Gradually, Moon River fell back into its natural rhythm of commerce and bustle, and when it was done, the priest gave us all a final blessing, and then Hollis and myself, with Moses at our side, rode south in search of new things to discover. Wow. Hope you guys enjoyed that story. I really did. Something really fresh, exciting, extremely scary. Please do let me know down below in the comments, guys. Of course, please do like and share. If you haven't subscribed to DMT, please do that as well. Your support is more than welcome. As ever, guys, please do remember, be safe, not sorry.